long it takes. An hour.
Okay.
Here we go. We're live.
To you live is the Auto Hub Show, changing automotive one show at a time with Ian and Jeff. And here we go.
Who said you can't teach an old dog new tricks? Hi, I'm Kayla Rubenstein, the founder and CEO of a company called Retail Resilient, social selling for the car industry. And we help auto dealers, auto agencies, and vendors in the auto industry sell more cars, service more cars, and make more money using our social selling strategy. That includes TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and anything else you can think of. Dealers, auto agencies, and vendors in the auto industry sell more cars, service more cars, and make more money using our social selling strategy. That includes TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and anything else you can think of. So if you're looking to invest thousands and make millions, we're definitely the social selling company for you. Like I said, who said you can't teach an old dog new tricks?
If you run a service drive, you know these days first impressions matter. But when your advisors are tied up with inbound phone calls, they tend to neglect their other, more important duties. And did you know 75% of all service calls are frequently asked questions and routine requests? Still, the average dealer misses up to 30% of inbound calls, adding up to a ton of missed service opportunity and increased customer churn. 68% of callers actually go elsewhere if they can't get through, which means you could be losing $60,000 to $70,000 every month in service revenue simply from missing calls. So who will pick up? Introducing Brooke.
Hi there.
Your best service scheduling assistant. Brooke is the first intelligent digital voice assistant to answer, handle, and appoint all of your inbound service calls. And talking to Brooke is like talking to a friend with human-level understanding in a friendly conversational voice. Her conversational intelligence is built on millions of actual service industry conversations. Book with Brooke today. Visit Brooke.ai or call 866-942-1236. Finally, the perfect match.
Our goals are always to improve. Every month we want to improve better on what we did the month before, maybe the year before. It's about how fast we can get the cars done with quality work to get it to the front line, because that's where we make our money. And the bottom line is the longer it takes, the more money you spend. We want to get it down as low as possible. Right now, like I said, we're in a great stage. We're at 4.5 days. In recon, we want to know how quickly we can get the cars out of the recon process and to the front line. The average days in recon and then the time to line are the most important things to be looking at. I'm Mike Burrell. I'm Service Director at JM Lexus.
Larry Feldman is probably the most amazing trainer that I've ever experienced in this business. I've been in the car business now for 35 years. Wow. And I've seen quite a few trainers. A lot of them are pretty good. I mean, really, I get something out of all of them that I've seen, really. But Larry is in another class. I really mean that. His training is literally riveting. A little while back, I sat in on his first training that I ever sat in on. It was for new hires. I still remember. I'll never forget it. About 25 people in the room who'd never sold cars before. And after 2 hours, I raised my hand. Larry stopped what he was doing and said, yes. And I said, maybe we should take a break. And literally, I'll never forget it. All 25 people turned around, looked at me, and went, well, okay. And he kept going for another 2 hours. Since then, I've seen a few other of his trainings. I've hired people out of his classes. All I can say is, you got to give him a try.
All righty. Good morning or good afternoon, and wherever time zone you are, and welcome to a special edition of the Auto Hub Show. I have a new guest today. We did do a show on Monday live with Jeff and myself. Obviously, Jeff is absent today. He was busy doing other things. But I have a special guest here, Alex. Is it Guberman? Is that how you pronounce it?
Alex Guberman, yes.
Not a problem. So, Alex, maybe you can tell us a little bit about what you do and what you add to the EV world.
Well, I've been an electric car YouTuber for now 6 years, which is really unbelievable because I never thought I've been doing it 4 years. 4 out of those years, I've been doing it as my main job. I still can't believe. I do electric car news. I started with Tesla news and then essentially transitioned into electric car news. And what I've been doing lately is I've been essentially saying things and pointing out things that really nobody in the media wants to point out for different reasons. So, if you point something out in terms of Tesla maybe not being perfect or Elon Musk, you get the Musketeers, the Elon Musk army after you, and it's not pleasant.
Right.
And if you say anything about other manufacturers, new or legacy, they basically cut you out of all of their media drives and media events. And because of the way the industry works, you don't get to hear the truth from pretty much any YouTuber or journalists out there because, you're not invited to media drives, then you don't have a channel or you don't have a publication. So I guess my job lately has been doing just that, at pointing things out that nobody else wants to or just afraid to. So that's my gig.
Interesting. Well, we actually had a journalist at scale on the show on Monday, automotive journalist. She does events around the world, launches different products. And she was actually doing kind of a smackdown on one of our other guests who used to work for Tesla, was their used car czar, but now he works for a different company. I can let Brent go into those reasons if you reach out to on LinkedIn. But the thing that was interesting was she was going to go to the Cybertruck launch, and they were saying, nope, no journalists. And she got in because she knew the designer. That was the only reason she got into that launch. So it was kind of interesting that you bring that up because there was recently an announcement. I think I saw it at scale today on LinkedIn about Cadillac's new $300,000 US electric. I'm not sure what demand there is for a $300,000 Cadillac electric, but it's clearly interesting that that bar in the high end of electric cars, let's say it was set by the Tesla Model Plaid, then it was beaten by Lucid Air, and now we're raising that bar even more as the Hummer is now kind of affordable compared to this Cadillac. But the bigger question that I have as a car enthusiast, former car retailer, but with a deep family history in the business and working in the industry for a long time, is there's obviously a move towards that goal of 100% electric, or at least that seems to be what the politicians are saying. I don't think that's really realistic. And the reason I'm saying that is I happen to live in Vancouver, BC, which has a really high adoption of electric for Canada and probably high for North America. But when I sold cars, and this was back in the day when hybrids were the first sort of alternative vehicle out there, we sold 5 to 10% in BC, and I was one of the top salesmen selling them. So my question is, when you look at those targets of, call it 35%, that seems to be what everyone's saying. Do you think that's really attainable in North America in 2022, 2023? Even with the Inflation Reduction Act in the US, where they're doing a rebate of $7,500, for example.
What is obtainable?
Yeah, 30. Do you think we'll get to 35% electric car sales in the next year? Call it 2022,
no, I don't know
2023.
anybody who's saying that. First of all,
yeah.
Second of all, let me just go back for a second. Okay, so there is a demand for a $300,000 a Cadillac. Is just the number of people is small, but I can understand why people would want to have that if you have money. After all, $300,000, honestly, it's not even that much. Like make $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 here working for Google as engineers,
right?
And also, I got to tell you that Cybertruck unveiling did have journalists. Actually, that was the only Tesla event that officially had a good PR organization at Tesla inviting actual giving out press passes. I had 2 of them. So I don't know what guest of yours was talking about. That is not correct.
I wasn't there. That was what I was told.
I was. That's why this is my job, to correct people who weren't there and yet saying something that's not true. Now you immediately see the benefit of me present on social media, because people say a lot of stuff that's not true. But back to your question. So who is saying that there will be over 30% adoption rate of new electric vehicle sales?
Well, I mean, when you look at high water marks, say at Norway is, I think, one of the ones that's the highest in the world. And China is another market that's getting there. You know, they're looking at that target of say it from 30 to 85 in that range. And you look at, say, North America, which I think right now is about 5 to 10% as a high water mark. In order to get to that cutoff at, say, 2035 of 100% electric, and we were talking about this earlier with New York State and California already saying this, we're not going to sell ICE vehicles. We're not going to allow them to be sold, whatever. In order to get there, say, and let's just say that's in 10 years for easy math, you've got to move the needle from 10% to 100 pretty quickly. Like, it's not like you're going to go from 0 to 100 in 10 years. I just don't see it. So the reason I picked 35% is, to me, that was kind of a reasonable move. To go from 10 to 30 is a big deal, but how are you going to get to 100 if you can't even move the needle from 5 to 10, for example? So that's reasonable.
I'll tell you why 35 next year is unreasonable. First of all, this is the first time I'm even hearing that number for the next year. Mm-hmm. The way adoption happens with new products, and this is not just electric cars, I mean, you can observe it with smartphones and so forth, is that it's slow in the beginning. But once it hits that critical point, the adoption goes very, very fast. At some point, people will realize that buying a gas car, in another 3 or 4 years, and if you're going to keep it for 3 or 4 or 5 years, financial decision, and they will have to go with an electric car just so they don't lose money on the resale value. Right. So that's just one of the reasons why this is going to be kind of a hockey stick type of a scenario. So we don't need to be at 35% next year to go all electric by 2035. The half of the people will come around in the last couple of years, so that's number one. Number two, comparing America and Norway as far as electric car adoption is that's not reasonable. I mean, I was just in Norway in June. Yeah. And, I saw how many electric cars they have on the road, which is a lot. And I asked people, and I mean, not the brand that brought me there. Like, I asked regular people on the street when I see them getting into their electric cars, I said, hey, well, why'd you buy it? And they say, well, these are cheaper. Not really only cheaper to buy, they're cheaper to own. There's no maintenance, and electricity is much cheaper. But it's all government kind of sponsored incentives there. Here, especially with this new act, I know people say, well, this is a great law that was passed that, we're going to extend the tax credits. Actually, most tax credits that right now people were enjoying for electric cars are going to go away with that bill. I don't think people realize that. So we're going to have less incentives, and they're going to have more incentives next year. So we're nothing like, as a matter of fact, we're opposite of Norway as far as electric car adoption goes.
Well, yeah, I mean, when you look at laws, and this Inflation Reduction Act is a classic case, it's a long document with a few things, but more importantly, there's a few things they add in, there's a few things they take out. And I kind of compare it to the Clash for Clunkers debacle a number of years ago, where the program became so popular that then the dealers complained when it went away. I mean, my viewpoint on it is really simple. The math has to make sense for the manufacturer, but it has to make sense for the consumer. And it doesn't make sense to throw money at a problem when really the money shouldn't be part of the solution. The solution should be, I'm building a better car. I've got to make it affordable for the average person in order for it to make sense. Now, we talked about this a little bit yesterday because that lifespan of cars in North America, which used to be, say, 5 to 7 years, and then people got rid of it and they bought something else or whatever, the first ownership term, is now stretching out to 10 to 12 years. And with electric cars, it might be 15 plus years. I mean, there was an article yesterday, I believe it was published, or at least promoted yesterday in Forbes magazine, where they were talking about the lifespan of a battery. Even if you wanted to get to that 20, 30% number, can we physically make and sell enough cars around the world to even get there? That'd be the bigger question. But more importantly, when I look at your average Toyota Corolla to pick a car really at random, and you compare that to a Tesla Model 3 or Tesla Model Y, really the cost of those cars is still way too much for most people. And I think that's the bigger concern, not the politicians. They're always going to posture. But the question is, how do you solve this problem? And I think part of the solution is multiple engine choices and conversion of existing cars. Nobody's talking about that, which surprises me, except for in the high end, when you see people go, I have a classic Porsche, I wanted to make it electric. Or if I'm Ewan McGregor, I want to make my Beetle electric. Or if I've got an old Volkswagen bus, I want to make it electric. Do you think the future is electric, though? That's the question.
Yeah, there's no doubt in anyone's really mind that the future is electric. It's like asking if the future is all about smartphones rather than flip phones. That has already been decided for us. There's nothing we can do whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
Now, the idea that cars need to be converted into electric cars, that's a great idea until you actually realize it's much more expensive to convert one, and you void any warranty and all kinds of safety requirements that just fly out of the window with conversions. So that is non-starter, that people will convert their classic cars just for shits and giggles. But as far as a regular person converting their Toyota Corolla into electric, the Toyota Corolla costs whatever, very little, 20 something, 30 something dollars. To convert it, it will be like 30. I mean, you can buy a new Toyota Corolla for that. So that's a non-starter. But let's go back to you saying, let's have affordable electric cars.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about it, right? Because this is a math problem, which Americans don't do very well with. Because what people don't understand is that a price of the car as a concept has changed. Just like when we got an iPhone, it was no longer an actual phone. Now it became a little computer. As a matter of fact, I don't even use my phone as a phone anymore, and I'm sure a lot of people don't either. So what people don't realize is the price of a car is no longer a price of the car, because what you have to build into this now is the fact that you don't have to do oil changes or tune-ups or transmission. The car doesn't brake as much. As a matter of fact, your actual brakes don't get used much because of regen braking, so you don't have to change your brakes very often. And on top of that, the electricity is so much cheaper than gas, especially now. But even before the prices went up, and as a matter of fact, you can kind of have it free if you have solar panels on your roof. So the whole total ownership cost of an electric car is significantly less. Now, if you want to talk numbers about just the price, well, an average car price right now is $45,000, which I recently realized. I didn't realize that it went that much higher. And even without the incentives, there are plenty of electric cars out there that are below that price. I mean, honestly, there's at least 10 models out there right now that are below average
Right.
price. So as far as having affordable electric cars, which means below average, right? We have now plenty. As a matter of fact, you can get a Nissan Leaf for like under $20,000 after the incentives while they're lasting.
Right.
But the way you convert to any new technology, you basically have some help from the government. And I thought tax credits was actually a pretty damn good way of going about it. Federal tax credits, where if you buy an electric car, you get up to $7,500 in tax credits. Now, they're not going to be tax credits anymore. They're essentially going to be a point of sale rebates. But what we had going on was actually pretty decent until now this change.
Right.
So yeah, we do need help from the government when we're adopting something. But even without it, the sales are proving everyone wrong who thinks that future is anything but electric.
Well, it's interesting because there's also some discussion around charging of vehicles, specifically around urban density and urban reality, which is that the electric grid in North America, and this is probably also true in other countries, really can't sustain charging at scale. And it's kind of funny because there's a gas station 2 blocks away from me, and they recently put in a couple of charging stations. And you see the conga line almost every day where people are trying to get a charge on their vehicle. And part of the reason is I live in an area that's highly, there's a lot of condominiums. I mean, there are houses, but there's quite a few condominiums which don't have the infrastructure. But the bigger question becomes, let's just say you move that needle from 5% to 10%. Can you realistically charge those amount of vehicles in big urban centers like New York City or LA or Toronto or Chicago or where I live, Vancouver, or even cities like London, England? I mean, there's been some interesting discussion around parking meters, which I thought was kind of interesting. on the show on Monday. But more importantly, when the government figures out that they start not being able to collect gas taxes, how do you pay for this infrastructure? It's only a question of when they start taxing vehicles that happen to not be reliant on petroleum products. Because realistically, they got to replace that revenue. But more importantly, electric cars weigh a lot more than their gas counterparts. So they put more wear and tear on the road infrastructure. So that's another area where people really aren't talking. But
we are talking about it.
Yeah.
We absolutely are. And as a matter of fact, DMV, at least here in California, they already charge you more for an electric car because they need to collect a little bit more revenues. And yeah, I'm sure there will be, extra taxes on this. And in some places, there's already been implemented. That's very fair. I don't think anybody argues that shouldn't be the case. And infrastructure is obviously something that's growing with the industry. 99% of people should charge at home, right? You should have a charger at home, especially if you own your own home. That shouldn't be a problem. Condominiums should have their own private garages, but apartment complex, that's still a bit of a problem. However, the infrastructure bill that was just passed is actually going to help drastically with that, right? And there are laws, especially local laws, that are being passed that now require apartment complexes and condominium complexes to actually install charging stations, dedicated charging stations for the dedicated spots for the electric cars. So everything is moving in the right direction. The infrastructure bill will actually bankroll a lot of it. And of course, solar, that when you put that on your house, especially with home batteries, will solve this problem for a lot of people.
I agree. I mean, when you look at what Tesla's done with charging, whether it be the supercharger stations or the home batteries, and it looks like General Motors is going to try and follow in suit with their I'm not sure what they're calling the new battery tech, but there was a whole thing this morning I was watching on, they're going at Tesla with this. And actually the preview video for the show yesterday, we talked a little bit about the cars coming in 2023 and some that'll end this year. I think there will be a lot of electric car choices, and I don't disagree that you will have adoption, but I think it's going to be a long time before you have a large percent of adoption, really just because of the financing terms for a lot of vehicles that are on the road now. I mean, some of the financing for vehicles that are on the road now is, 60, 80, 96 months. So even if you wanted to get out of those cars, to move to electric, it's going to be very challenging for people, especially if we get into a recession, which may or may not happen. The economists seem to not be able to agree, which isn't surprising to me. But when you look around the world, and I had the opportunity to visit China in 2019 personally, which is about 30% of the global market for cars and growing, those markets I think are very interesting just because they don't have a long history of ICE vehicles. They've only been in vehicles for a short period of time. I think Volkswagen started building cars there in 84. So really changing those vehicles, whether it be a car, a scooter, electric bike, whatever it might be, is not going to be as difficult. But more importantly, they have the government and manufacturing muscle to get it done. And there's actually been a new company that's come on the scene, at least in North America, from, I believe they're from Vietnam, I think it's VinFast, who's trying to do that as well as when you look at Tata Motors, they have a new electric car they're launching, which is under 10 grand. And we've actually had a company from Sweden called Unity Electric that has a Swedish design one that was a two-seater, one seat in front of the other, kind of like the old Messerschmitts. And last but not least, there's Electromechanica that has a one-seater delivery vehicle that they're selling in the US. I think there's been a lot of interest from Domino's and others. I think the future is transportation choice, engine choice, power choice. Are you using like a hybrid or a plug-in hybrid or electric or hydrogen or a combination? I think that's really going to be how we bridge between ICE vehicles and maybe an electric future, is those choices in between are where things are going to be interesting. But more importantly, I think ownership term of vehicles and how people own them, to your point, is going to change. Those millennials and younger, they really don't want to own cars the way their parents did. And at least that's what the discussion was yesterday. I mean, what's your thought on that?
Well, okay. So first of all, let me finish the previous thought where I was going with the charging infrastructure in California.
Yeah.
So in California, it looks like we're going to mandate that you only, if you're selling a new car, you can only sell an electric car by 2035, which is more than a decade away.
Yeah.
Now the problem here, and honestly, my last day in California is going to be at the end of this month. I had enough. And by the way, I'm not a Republican or Democrat. I'm very much an independent, and it's not just the politics that I'm tired of here. But one of the things, if we're just talking about electric cars, is that, it's great that the government stands up and says, we're going to only sell electric cars here in 2035. But what he somehow forgot to mention is that, every time we have a hot summer, which is every time really, every year, and everybody turns their air conditioning on, we have rolling blackout like we're a third world country. I have friends in Thailand that don't have as many rolling blackouts or blackouts at all, and that's a developing country. So if we don't have enough, if our infrastructure is not good enough to keep lights on in our houses and our hospitals and everywhere else when it's a little bit hot outside, how are we going to support electric cars? And by the way, an electric car takes, especially if you have two of them in your home, to get just as much electricity as your entire home with air conditioning, heating, and so forth. So until we address the infrastructure, which we haven't, right? We haven't addressed infrastructure here in California at all. We have a PG&E here that's ruling pretty much most of the state, has been, burning down the cities and killing people literally, and nothing has been done about it. So until we can even talk about, 2035 and selling all electric cars only, we need to make sure that it is even possible just logistically. And right now, until something changes, I just don't see that happening. We have done a horrible job here in California being prepared for that.
Well, I would agree. I mean, when you look at infrastructure and you look at charging infrastructure, more importantly, the power grid, the biggest challenge is that nobody wants to build more infrastructure, but more importantly, people don't want more power cables in their neighborhood. I mean, there was recently a case here, what was it, 10 years ago? There was a bunch of houses that the neighborhood was in the middle of a bunch of high power lines with the big, metal, whatever those things are. And they actually had to buy all the houses away from the people because the people were claiming they got cancer from it and everything else. And the city, at the end of the day, didn't want to tear down these houses. So what they did is they just sold them for 50 cents on the dollar to other people who would accept the risk. So part of it is that, but part of it is just building infrastructure the way we need it at scale is going to take a long time. But more importantly, it's a politically hot potato, right? Everyone wants a solution, but no one wants to deal with the problem. Right?
Well, honestly, I don't even know why it is a politically hot potato. California is known to be very much anti-corporation, except unless that corporation is PG&E, right? So that's actually not on brand at all for California. If anything, I would expect them to basically, force this company to be more of a publicly owned or something like that. However, I do have to say that, the infrastructure for charging and for electricity really should go on the roof of your house and on the roof of your building. The problem with that is that, and this is what, once again, where utility companies are getting on the way, it takes like 2 or 3 months sometimes to turn it on. As a matter of fact, it is required that somehow it's connected to the grid. Why? I don't need, the whole reason I'm putting up solar panels on my roof is so I don't have to ever deal with PG&E and utility companies. Why are they required to be in my life when I'm trying to cut them out and generate my own energy? Those are the laws that need to change, because infrastructure is, we don't need even California to build more towers or whatever. I mean, it would be nice if they do. What we need California is to get the hell out of our way when we're putting up the solar panels on our houses, which is essentially every individual is building their own infrastructure. You put enough panels on your house, especially here in California, and 2 or 3 batteries, you don't need any of this. You don't need PG&E. You don't need any utility companies. What California needs to do is not just to better our infrastructure, but get the hell out of the way, or make sure that PG&E is out of the way when we are doing their job and creating the infrastructure. So it is actually a much more complicated issue than that. But let me get back to last question, which I'm actually trying to remember what it is because you kind of brought up a lot of things. So do you want to narrow it down to just one question so I can just start with that?
Well, we're looking at power. We're looking at access to power. We're looking at the average 1.2 cars or 2 cars. We're looking at politics. We're looking at power generation. Obviously, some climates, be it Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, California, has lots of sun. But the power company wants to make money. And I use the example here of I live in an area where we have lots of hydroelectric power. Because I live in BC, there's lots of mountains. So there's lots of hydroelectric power. So power generation isn't the issue. The challenge is the power company wants to make money. So, from a point of view of California, the reason the government isn't involved in that is they don't want to step on that employer who actually makes money. The solution, though, is to say, okay, how do we make it work with one gas car and one electric car? Because going to 2 is probably long time moving. But also the government, and there's actually a really interesting movie about this called Garbage Warrior, where they talk about building houses that are completely off grid, like no sewage, no power, no anything. And the guy who did this, he lost his architectural license, and because the city or the state or the county didn't want him doing this because they don't make any money from the land, right? Like he bought the land, he built these houses, they're off the grid. So part of it is that. But part of it is also, can you realistically, in a big urban environment like Los Angeles, be off-grid and charge your cars and live without participating in that? I mean, that's the big challenge.
Well, I mean, it depends. If you want your sewage to be off-grid, I don't know about that. But if you want your electricity to be off-grid, yes, it is very, very, very much possible. As a matter of fact, you get still a lot of incentives from the government to put those up. As a matter of fact, you really have zero investment a lot of times into putting solar panels on your house, because essentially what you're going to be you're paying them off over a 25-year period.
Yep.
You pretty much end up paying them same or less, and definitely with time less than you're paying to PG&E here in California. So that actually makes a lot of sense for people, and a lot of people are doing it. It's just California needs to, if anything they do well, is to get a corporation off of our back. And yet they kind of failed to do that. But listen, I can bitch and complain about California all I want. I mean, I'm moving that's one of many reasons why I want to move. But bottom line is this. The future is electric. There's just no doubt about it. The electric cars are just better almost in every single way than gas-powered cars at this point. Like whether it's performance, technology, whatever. It's like in every single way, they're just better at this point. They are getting cheaper. And then the infrastructure being built. Yeah. Is this going to happen next year where everything's perfect? No. But in another 10 years, depending on how helpful our government is going to be, they are not right now, we're definitely going to get there. Now, do we want to once again fall behind yet another country? We already fell behind China. Do we want to fall behind Norway? Well, we are on our way. So it's going to be up to us and our government to decide, do we want to be the dummies in the world who are still driving the cars that are powered by a goo that comes out from the ground from the places where they don't want us, and blow it up under the hood? Or do we want to actually be in the new civilized society of people who make and drive electric cars like China and Europe, especially Norway, are? I mean, my hopes are pretty low for us as a country to make good decisions for ourselves. But at the end of the day, we will be dragged there by the rest of the world, whether we like it or not.
So what advice would you give the leaders today who are doing a lot of what you would call woke signaling, environmental signaling about what could happen or what may happen or what they'd like to happen versus actually what they'd have to do to get there? I mean, that's really I love ideas, but you got to have a plan to get there. I mean, that's where I see the falling down. What advice would you give the leaders to actually get us there versus talk about getting us there?
Well, I think the advice is not so much, okay, well, first let's start with what both parties need to stop doing. Again, I'm independent. Republicans need to stop basically being part of the gas industry, essentially, and move into the 21st century and realize that we need to go with renewable energy, green energy, that climate change is real. So Republicans need to do that. Now, Democrats need to understand that this is a capitalist country and you can't make a change and screw a bunch of businesses that provide jobs and pay taxes while making this change, right? Woke ideas don't pay taxes. So, and by the way, Democrats have a horrible PR, as we always know, right? Because these green jobs green industries providing a lot of new jobs. All the jobs are moving from the oil industry into the green industry. And yet you would know that because Democrats are not even saying that. So both of these parties need to, well, they're not going to, I'm just saying, if you ask me, they need to stop getting on the way of progress by either sticking with a technology of the past or getting on the way of capitalism, because we're still a capitalist country. But what we need is actually, I think, what we kind of passed now, this infrastructure, and I think it was relatively bipartisan.
Yeah.
The infrastructure, we need infrastructure for all of this, for the green energy, for charging, the incentives for electric cars and everything. Now, it is a horribly executed bill, right? Those incentives are actually going to be less next year by far than they are this year for electric cars. Let's be very clear about that. Electric cars will go up in price because of this bill, because you're not getting as much money back or any money back on these cars that you are getting the money back right now. But also, let's see how much money these knuckleheads are going to waste on giving contracts to people who are not going to execute or going to pocket a lot of money and not really provide the infrastructure. So that's what needs to happen. We passed the right idea of a bill, but are we going to execute it well? I mean, honestly, I don't know, but we need to go with the infrastructure and incentives for electric car purchases, and that's really the answer right now, because it's not even coming from me. It's coming from what you're seeing right now, the rest of the world doing, like China, Norway, Europe in general. So we need to, once again, try to catch up to the cool kids at this point.
So any final thoughts on I guess the electric car Tetris adventure that we're going through now, and how and what people should be putting on their list if they're looking for one right now?
Well, first of all, it's not very easy to get an electric car right now unless you're buying one of those expensive ones, right? Yeah. You will end up waiting for months and months and months, in some cases a year or so, especially if something popular like the electric F-150. Yeah. So you might want to start deciding now and putting $100 to $200 down just to reserve your spot. So whenever you are ready to buy that car in a year or two, at least you can. Because right now you cannot walk into a Ford dealership and ask to buy an F-150 Lightning. They will laugh you right out of the dealership, and that's going to happen with a lot of these electric cars. Right. And the reason for that is because demand is so high. You know, no one's actually waiting to get a regular gas-powered F-150, right? You can just walk in and buy one. But with an electric one, there's like 2 or 3 years worth of wait you're going to have to do. And the prices just went up once again. So start thinking about it now, and start thinking about living in a place where you can charge your car overnight. So if you're in your own house, then, you know, run yourself a 220 outlet, or, you know, you can split your electric dryers one, or make sure that if you are moving, move to a place that already has an electric car charger, or at least has plans to do so. So that's something that how you can prepare for the future. But, you know, if you're shopping for a car in another 2 or 3 years, I think your choice is going to be quite easy. As long as you have that charger at home, you'll see that the electric cars are just freaking better than gas cars. However, I want to go a little bit off topic of this question, though, and to mention that, you know, social media has affected people's minds a lot about everything, but including electric cars. And the reason people are seeing the benefits of electric cars is because of us, the influencers who over the last 10 years kind of brought it in. Right. But now, and a lot of times we've dealt with new brands that were kind of on our side, like Tesla and Rivian and Lucid and stuff like that, right? Right. However, things have changed, and people need to really watch what information they're being fed, because things have changed on both sides. On our side, the influencer, reporters, journalists, media side, a lot of big boys like you know, Motor Trend and Cars, whatever, they've all jumped in here, and now they're reporting on electric cars. And companies like Tesla and Rivian and Lucid has also just become publicly traded multi-billion-dollar corporations whose job it is not to make good cars for you and me. Their job is to make their investors as rich as possible. Remember capitalism?
Yeah.
So we need to understand that even though this is a new, green, happy technology, the way information is now being handled is very much the old way. If you're a journalist who is going to criticize any of these brands, you will be cut off from access to these cars immediately. I've been cut off by Rivian and Lucid and Tesla for pointing out issues with them. And the reason they have issues is because they are greedy multi-million-dollar corporations, as they've always been. And Rivian, Lucid, and Tesla and now just joined them. So you really, really cannot trust any YouTuber or any journalist that tells you about electric cars, because of the way we're doing media about electric cars is now old school, and I don't mean it in a good way. So watch out for 99% of journalists, YouTubers, and writers and media that are either don't have access or know they will lose access if they're going to start reporting about problems. And remember that these companies are no longer happy startups, all about you, my friends, looking for an electric car. They're trying to save money on you, whether it's safety or whatever it might be, and they're just trying to make money for themselves. In the case of Tesla, for the supreme leader and the richest man on earth, Elon Musk.
Fantastic. Well, I appreciate the thoughts there. Thanks for all your insight. I agree. Do your own homework, whether it be the Lemonade Guide or Car and Driver, just looking at cars. I mean, I've been a car fanatic my whole life, so I constantly look at cars. But more importantly, you want to look at what's the best decision for you and your family moving forward. And chances are those costs are going to come down over time, because as there's more options, the nature of economics is with more supply, the price tends to go down. And there's nothing wrong with looking at a used vehicle as long as it's one that, Consumers Report or someone else says is good, or you do your own homework and you like it. But I think electric cars are definitely going to be a larger and larger part of the market. They're not new. They've been around over 100 years, but the new ones are a lot better than the ones at the turn of the last century. But thanks for taking the time today to learn more about electric cars. And if you're going to be in Used Car Week San Diego, we're going to be broadcasting live from the show. And of course, thanks for watching the Auto Hub show, and a special thanks to our sponsor and Alex for taking the time today. Have yourself a great day. Thanks again.
Thanks for joining us. It was a great show, and follow us anywhere you would like on your favorite podcast, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and of course on our YouTube, or subscribe to our own channel.